Okay, so hello everybody, and thank you so much for coming to the second in the series of Overspill. This is a new research practice sharing series, so it's really great to see you all here. It would be hugely helpful to spread the word about Overspill as we are new. So if you enjoy today, which I'm sure you will, please spread the word in future for future events as well. We do have an Instagram where I will be sharing future events. And in fact, I'm just going to put our Instagram handle into the chat. But you all found this event somehow, whether that's through mailing lists, so I will be sending future events through those same portals as well. So I'm just going to quickly introduce Overspill and what this series is before explaining how today is going to run. So Overspill is a series of in-conversation events and also practice sharings with interdisciplinary artists working within the creative arts industry. This series focuses on celebrating the practice of artists that are maybe pushing back against categories or boundaries and exploding beyond the understood boundaries of creative work. So presence and agency are explored as central themes through Overspill, and how the artist or scholar might connect to ideas around self or identity in their practice. So today is estimated to run until about 7:30 p.m. So I will introduce Dr. Jungmin Song in a moment, but I'm going to have a conversation with Min that will last around an hour. And then this will open up for audience questions. So please be thinking about any questions or just general observations that you would like to offer Min at the end. Myself and my colleague Fraser, who is in the room, will do our best to find anyone that's got questions and to get through as many as we can. There is a little hand up emoticon that you can put onto your screen. But if you just wanted to put your camera on and wave at us, that's fine as well. And just to say as well, this, for people that have just joined, this conversation is being recorded. But I will stop the recording later when we open up the discussion for everyone else as well. So I'm going to now introduce our speaker today before we start our conversation. So we have Dr. Jungmin Song with us in the space today, who is an assistant professor in residence at the Department of Dramatic Arts, research associate at the Ballard Institute and Museum of Puppetry, and they are a performance artist. So Korean born, she studied theatre design at Central St. Martin's, University Arts London, before completing a Ph.D. in performance from the University of Roehampton. She worked as an assistant puppet maker at the Little Angel Theatre in London in the early 2000s, before turning to performance art. So after completing her PhD and having 2 children, she settled in suburban Connecticut in the US, which is where she is zooming in from today, where she started a new career as a curator at a puppet museum and teaching contemporary theatre and performance. She curated exhibitions, the exhibition Shakespeare and Puppetry, and Puppetry's Racial Reckoning, which sounds brilliant, and we'll get a chance to talk about that in a moment as well. So I'm now going to hand over to Min, if you want to just quickly say hello, and I will get our PowerPoint slides ready.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I think, I've been using Zoom a lot recently, but I think the best way probably is if you pin me. I think there's a way to pin me, right? And then you will see my face,
yes,
or my kind of gestures, right, along with the slide. That will be kind of better way to communicate. And then, like, if you kind of like make that kind of, there's a little green stick kind of thing in between slide and then people of lots of pictures of lots of people. That if you kind of make it in the kind of middle, you will have a half a slide and half of my face. So if you, I think that usually works best for me.
Yeah, that's
okay.
really helpful.
Okay.
Thank you, Min. I think yes. If you click the 3 dots in the corner of Min's image, there is an option that comes up that says pin. But brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to kick us off with the first question, Min. So what really interests me in your work is how it takes on different shifts and different forms, ranging from puppetry to performance art. So I wonder if you could first discuss how you became interested in puppetry.
Yes, I think a lot of turning point in my life, and then my career is happens probably by magic. I think that things happened, and then that became my turning point. The puppetry was really this one little theater in Islington, London. Now it is kind of one of the poshest area in London, perhaps, but was not quite that there when I started in early 2000. I believe it was 2001. So I just arrived in London as a student to study theater design. And then I saw advertisement of a puppet show, Sleeping Beauty, at this little theater called Little Angel Theater in Islington. And then really, I don't know, there are probably many space in London that put magic spell on you, but this was the place for me, Little Angel Theater. And then Lindy Wright, who you see in the picture, is one of the founders of the theater. She founded Little Angel in 1961, I believe, with her late husband, John Wright. So I really at that time, I hardly spoke English. And then just really, I really wanted to be around the theater. I really hang around and then do little things. And then I managed to sneak into the workshop and then became assistant for Lindy. It's really making puppets. So that's how I got interested in puppetry, and then it became part of my life. It's not just like doing puppetry. It was where I learned English, learned like having afternoon tea with biscuits. And like it became my second home for myself. I mean, that was like 20 years ago. And then maybe we can do next slide. Yes. And then so I did it was not for long. I was in Little Angel. It was during my like BA and some of my MA years. It was like I was around for around 3-4 years, mostly making puppets. So one of the biggest project that I assisted Lindy with was Venus and Adonis by Royal Shakespeare Company. It was 2004. So what is really special? So you can kind of, I mean, it will come up later. So if you are not kind of used to puppetry, that this is pretty much very dominant puppet style currently in the UK, and then a lot of European puppet show is called, so we call the bunraku style. So if you know like a more traditional European style, like Punch and Judy, that booth on the booth, or like string marionettes, that you don't see puppeteers. Puppeteers are behind the booth or up above behind the border. You don't see them. You just see strings and then hands pop up. But this particular style came from Japan. I mean, even though Japanese people don't recognize it as bunraku at all, this is called where you actually see puppeteers behind, and then controlled from the back. And then it mostly happens in not in Japan, but in the UK, was called this tabletop puppetry. So it happened on tables. So that's one particular style I worked a lot, because it's still the most popular style in the UK and then in continental Europe also. And then what was special about Lindy was that Lindy is very much into that material quality of puppets. So a lot of puppeteers I still see, I really feel that it's very special, because many puppeteers have more interest in sculptural element, like how you carve and how the appearances of objects. Whereas Lindy also put a lot of emphasis on material quality, that, for example, in Venus and Adonis, like it looks almost the same in the picture, but Venus is made with foam, very light material, whereas Adonis is made with very heavy wood. So you actually see one thing, when they are in motion, you can actually see the difference in motion, that you can hear the heavy footstep, that is a human Adonis. Whereas Venus actually walk without any sound, and then she can float very lightly. And then whereas Adonis always kind of chunky, then you can actually see the puppeteers feeling the weight in the show. So that's now I'm working in puppet museum at this moment, but like this kind of approach to puppetry is very, very rare. That like if you are in one style, make a puppet with mostly kind of same kind of materials, and then that's probably, I think that's what I learned a lot from Lindy, and then took it to my next move in my performance. Was I going to do next slide, or yes, I think I can do next slide. So there's another thing. I don't know like who's my audience is, but if you are in puppetry world, then you probably already know this Raku style puppetry. And then there is another thing, another genre called object theater. It's quite mostly it happens in like putting objects together, like everyday objects together in like human forms or animal form, and then make it kind of use it like as a puppet. But there are other ways of using object, but it's kind of object animation thing. If you see puppet show as like animating puppets, and then object is like a kind of like a theater genre that animating object. And then the picture you see here is some call that this is the first object theater show in Europe, but well, we don't know yet. But probably one of the early work of object theater by Gyula Mona. He's Hungarian theater practitioner, I can call him, and called Small Suicide. So there are three. It's composed of three tableaus. The most famous one is Alka-Seltzer tableau. It's basically, you know what Alka-Seltzer is. That so Alka-Seltzer want to play with the candies. It's candies. Yeah, so there is some difference between American English and then British English about candy, right? Candies. Alka-Seltzer wanted to play with the candies, and then they bullied by candies, and then so he kind of wrapped himself in the candy wrapper, but still being found out it's not candy, it's Alka-Seltzer, and then he committed suicide into water, and then you see it kind of fizzle to disappear. This is kind of like one of the object theater kind of thing, and that I was very much exposed to in early 2000 when I started as a kind of performance art. I think that.
So, yeah, that might be a nice point then, Min, if I jump in and just, because there's some really nice connections here. You're talking about objects and animating objects. And I know your solo performance art practice was really minimal, but deals with objects in a really interesting way, such as paper, balloons, and biscuits, which we might come to in a while. But can you speak to how that practice began, and maybe your approach to how you animated those objects?
Well, yes, this is like, I don't know how that began, but somehow it began. So I can talk about how, I don't know how, but it began. So maybe we can go to next slide. That probably I wasn't not, so I somehow, there was something like, I probably was a very negative person. Maybe. I thought it's not right to have an object to kind of animating object itself should be, it shouldn't be like object should remain object to be animated. That's what I thought. You know what I mean? Like you may animate it by making it look like human or behave like human. Then why that? I felt that's wrong. There are a lot of things I thought like 20 years ago. I kind of think now I think funny, but there's one thing I see. Why did I think that way? But yeah, that's what I thought. So I was kind of searching for ways to kind of animate object as that object being itself. Yes, that was kind of what I was trying to do. Then one of the first performance I made was this Lighter Than the Air. There was a balloon and thread. Is a balloon show basically. So I had the silver balloons up to the ceiling, and then pull them down one by one. Then I had the red balloon. I inflated with my breath, and then I had it tied on my ankle. And then could you go to next slide? And then I pulled the gray balloon one by one, and then I popped all the balloons, and then also popped the red balloon. That's kind of that was my first show. I mean, you can see the old video, but that was done in theater space, so I couldn't have balloon up to the ceiling because of the lighting grid. But you can see what happens in the show in that video. I'll give you the link later. So that time, could you go to next slide? So at that time, like the show was what made the show lively was to me that was about material quality of helium-filled balloons, and then like breath-filled balloons, that difference in weight, and then the sound it makes when I pop the balloons, and then all that was kind of, I felt that was kind of going away from the mainstream object theater kind of tendency to humanize object. And then maybe next slide. And so at the time still was very much into like a theater kind of theater. There are many ways to distinguish theater and performance, but it was a kind of performance that has a beginning and end. And then there was no kind of story like there was once upon a time there was a prince or the kind of thing. No, there's nothing like that. But it was a kind of sequence of gestures or actions with the beginning and end. And then I still had that kind of storyboard before I make the performances.
Yeah, I was just going to ask around that, Min, actually. Can you talk about why you included these storyboards and sort of the process of how you made the work?
Wow, I just realized I'm really not good at answering why. No.
Was this always a starting point for you in your
Yes, it
performance?
was before. I mean, there are many ways of doing performance art, but it's like I'm very bad at rehearsals. But I go through I was doing solo shows, so I do kind of like try out things with the object. I did a lot. So kind of find the right movement with the object, like how I pick things up and then how I blow balloons, how I pop balloons, and then I kind of try a lot of those, but I didn't really do kind of sequence I don't have like a set the work and then try from the beginning to the end. I hardly did it, but I go through kind of the sequence in my head, and then also did it with the drawing. I mean, like I almost stopped doing storyboard after this one. So, but I think it was probably a kind of habit I learned from working on theater design also. Yes, but yeah, so that's another thing. Like I tried different things, like there are kind of so many ways to pop balloons also, and then that makes different sounds how you pop balloons. So that kind of you need to test out. But that I did a lot, but not kind of sequential work. Yes, so this is a kind of way for me to kind of like understand what I'm doing. Of course, it didn't happen in a way in the first picture. Like I didn't float away, but kind of like giving me kind of sense of what I was kind of thinking. So yeah, I think that's what it is. Yes.
Yeah.
And then maybe next to, and then that I think that's all I have as a storyboard. Yeah, and then so then in terms of that was probably one of the most complicated performance I ever did. And then I started a PhD, and they became really minimal. It's another thing. I don't know why I thought that way at that time. Now I think it's very funny. That's another thing that, so when I started PhD, I don't know if it was still the case, but it was that I felt, my understanding was at the time is that practice as research itself was quite, what is the right way, kind of fragile term. So when you do PhD, you have to, I felt I have to frame it as research pretty kind of well, because otherwise it is your just performance work, right? Then it's not research. So what I went through was that I kind of read things about like how scientific research is done. And then like what scientific experiment is meant to be. So what is done in scientific research is that there is variables and then there's a fixed element. So you just change one element and then check the different outcomes. So, okay, then I should do that. So it's to make it as a kind of, to justify my performance as research that, okay, I only do one object at a time. That's why it became one object performances. So I am fixed. Yeah, I'm my body and then me are fixed element. I change object. And then how I see the outcome changes. There was the logic behind the become just one object. And then going back to the earlier question about animating everyday object as it is, not trying to make it into something else as it is. So I don't know, like people still read that Heidegger thing, like usefulness thing. That's so okay. I do that. I perform the way it is used. So I separated the element in the first performance. I just do perform with thread, and then so it's just whole performance was just me on, what is it called, unwind a spool of a thread.
Yeah.
That's how it became minimalist. It was to kind of put it into the frame of research. I mean, and then like, of course, I had a lot of colleagues who do so many different ways of doing research, but somehow I felt that I had to go this way to justify my performance as a research. I don't know if it was to justify or to make my performance into research. So that came from there. So that's how it became minimalist. I think Sophie, I think your next question was to how.
Yeah. So
maybe
So one thing I really want to hear more about is, because you've spoken about how the practice is really minimalist, and normally it's you and only one object. So in that work, you're very exposed as a performer. So there's something there about your presence in the work that I think in puppetry is doing something quite different, because you're maybe less exposed and putting presence into the puppet or the object. So is there something you can talk about that shift in presence in your work?
Oh yeah. Yes, I was thinking about something else. Okay. Yes. So my performance was about object, but what about the object too, I can kind of put it aside next. And then, but on the other hand, that people kind of saw me more than the object. So it became more about me doing something. It's difficult to say in puppetry. I mean, it became more sensitive issue about who is doing puppeteering, especially in terms of voice, and then the relationship with the puppet and the puppeteer, like a female puppet with a male puppeteer, all that kind of thing. It became very complex as the field kind of become more sophisticated, if you can say, if I may say. But in my performance, so my whole aim was to kind of disappear from the performance in a way. I know that it doesn't make sense because I am there. I mean, there are a lot of ways to do performance without you there. That's without the artist there. There are people doing that, but somehow I insist that I'm there. But at the same time, I always say that I want to disappear, like just leave the object. Especially in terms of at the beginning, I think it was also early 2000, and then as time passed, it changed a lot. But especially early 2000s, I think that being Asian woman was quite it meant something, like kind of strange. Like that, it's not strange. Like I now understand better that why people think that way. That oppressed or like vulnerable is that came, and then always me being East Asian always kind of relate to, and then I kind of do a lot of like slow movement that always, like, people ask me if I ever did the futo. Never seen one. So it's that always was the I mean, at that time, well, I had the trouble with it. Yes, a lot of it. But now I'm okay. Now I kind of like, I am I think I kind of like thinking that at that time I was asking for impossible. Like I put myself there, and then why can't people see me? And then like I understand. Then now I understand there are like all sorts of other things associated with my body. I understand that so better. But I felt at that time there was difficulty, but. So I didn't want to, I felt so bad about why my object that should be the center of the stage, always like people don't see what's going on there, and they always see me and then kind of associated with the Asian woman. So that was, yeah, but I think you cannot kind of stop that happening in many ways. I mean, even though if I'm a white man, I think that people might ask why white man does that anyway. So that's
And I have
yeah.
another question from that, because what you're talking about is really interesting. Did you feel then within this kind of work, this minimalist work, that you had agency, that you had a sense of power, maybe in comparison to your audience? Yeah, anything about agency and how you felt in those performative moments?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty well known for pretty vulnerable on stage. Because I always had this kind of funny thing about really shaky hands. This is another thing, like I had that irony of shaky hands that like a lot of people mention shaky hands, and it's because I work with a certain tension with object. So it's the way I make it alive is to putting into the brink of certain kind of tension moment that, like for example, when I do work with the glass and water, that I fill the glass up to really to the moment to kind of it fills to the top. Then you never know until it spill. Like you're talking about overspill, that you know it is full, that only after it spills. Does it make sense? Because
so there's a little bit of risk, maybe.
Yeah, so if you kind of start to drop water into it, it always have that tension above the rim of the glass. So when it kind of, you don't know when the last drop is, like, and then I feel it, and then I try to move it without spilling it. That's the whole performance of the spill. Was pour water into glass as much as I can. It should be, and then kind of push it on the table without spilling it. Of course, I spill always, but that's how I made it kind of. That is the kind of way to give focus to the object, that people always become engaged with that kind of that threshold of something happening and not happening, and if I manage it not. So this was that's the tension between me and the object, and how I make it alive in a way. And then the spill at the end, I kind of just spill out all the water left in the glass. That's how I start. And then for the biscuit also, I have a biscuit on the table, and then just roll it vertical with the 2 fingers. And then that it all involves very, very tense activities, even though it doesn't look sometimes, but that shaky hands was always the issue, because I cannot lift even the glass because my hand is so shaky. And then it's all the performances were like that, like task based. I set task and then I do it. And then there's this kind of problem I had. So to do the task, that is the aim of the performance, I had to stop shaking my hand. But I know that people think that my shake hands are very watchable. They kind of like, so then I had that issue, like, and then the shaky hands doesn't always come. It's kind of like if that spirit of shaky hands around me that happens, or it doesn't happen also. It's not something I can control in full of. That's kind of agency I had in a way.
Yeah, and I think that sort of action of your body doing something that's involuntary, that you can't help, it really draws focus to the liveness of that event as well, that the audience is sharing with you.
Yes, it's I mean, like, that's, I usually very much terrified, like I remember that after I did a performance for Spill Festival, and then I read that somewhere I look like I always want to run away from performance. I think that's the kind of liveliness I have in my performance, I guess. Oh yes, so see, what's the rainbow? I have one chapter about Lindy's work, in my PhD thesis, and then I have another chapter about rainbow. So the whole thing I did is to make any object alive. Is one thing was based on this Heideggerian philosophy of good object that is in usefulness, and then second thing was about its materiality. I believe that is deeply influenced by Lindy's work about materiality of puppet material. And then, so why this is something you might want to watch, like it's like a rainbow. This rainbow simply is water drops in the air meet sunlight and then creating color. It's a kind of natural phenomena, but we always not all people, but we get drawn into it, that this is natural phenomena, but it doesn't really mean anything, but it can still be meaningful for the audience. That was a kind of my conclusion for the PhD, I think. Yes.
Yeah.
That's yes. So it's so animation is really about bring out the material quality in motion of the object in the performance, and then I am kind of like initiation. I think I was probably more than an initiator, but I was kind of doing that together with the object, bring out the quality.
Yeah.
But
lovely. And so we've spoken about puppetry a little bit, which we'll return to in a moment, and then your performance art. So part of this series is thinking about interdisciplinarity and the self. So maybe where you would situate yourself as an artist. Would you say that your practice is interdisciplinary, Min?
No, yes, I think I have always have trouble with the word artist. I found the artist, the word is always to me, it's always kind of too vague as an identity, or maybe it's somewhere I think that ID is coming with the ID card. I think that's why probably I did the PhD to have a student ID card. And then that's why I was most terrified to finish a PhD, because I don't know what I'm doing next. No ID card afterwards.
Yeah.
And then actually towards the end of my PhD, I didn't even have my passport for 2 years because it was taken by UK government. So that's artistry has always been difficult word for me. As who I am. I'm still, even now, I'm not producing any artwork at this moment. That even more difficult. In terms of interdisciplinary, that I thought about this question, that it's not, I don't think it is about discipline. I think it is about more like who I met. I met that moment of my life, I met Lindy. And then after that, I met Franco B. That's how I got into performance art. And then after that, I mean, Franco B introduced me to Adrian Heathfield. He was my supervisor. And then that's more like, it's not, I mean, at this moment, I'm also working for, very strangely working for international organization, like composed of so many national centers. That's the same, like it's not difficult, it's not about which country the national center located. It's about who is the person working for the center. Like it's not like a discipline that moved me. I think it was the people who moved me. So yes, and then I was going to kind of talk about the other. So, and then what happened was I was just almost doing nothing at the end. So it became so minimal that I felt that I kind of hit the kind of solid ground that I cannot go anywhere. So at that moment, Adrian Heathfield, he was my supervisor. He told me about Stuart Sherman. And then he said that Stuart Sherman is your ancestor. So, okay. So Stuart Sherman, you know that he worked in 1970s, and what he did was, I mean, he was interdisciplinary. He did the sculpture, he did the performances, and then one of the series he did was doing this little object performance pieces in this small like a foldable chair, foldable table in kind of streets of New York, or he did it in theater space. He did a lot of different action with this object. And then one of his performance was called Hamlet Portrait. That is a title. It was not tabletop show, but I just heard that title, Hamlet Portrait, and then I decided to make Hamlet tissues. I decided to make Hamlet because my ancestor did it, so I will try it. So I came back to I also felt that I need to try something different, just stop being just experiment. I've done with the experiment, and then I wanted to make kind of theater kind of piece. So this was kind of my analysis of Hamlet. What I looked at the Hamlet is that everyone dies in Hamlet eventually, but they all dies with the poison, and then a lot of fighting went on, but there's only one person died with stabbed by sword, like actually they all died with this poison. And then in the beginning, when the ghost came in front of Hamlet, I just assume everyone was saying this may be wrong, but the saying described that how that the poison affected his body. So my kind of like interpretation is to that melting of skins, the body cells into making that into tissue. So tissue is kind of pond, that tissue is a tissue paper, at the same time tissue of in your body, right? So basically all the shows, what it was is that I spray water into tissue paper, and then it's kind of begin to melt, and then oh yes, and of course Ophelia died with water also. So this is the death by liquid. So of course, I made Ophelia with the paper, and then she commits suicide in the pool of water. So that's kind of, came out of that kind of minimal experiment mode to kind of making another kind of story piece. There was, I think I made a couple of more shows after this, but this was kind of my last show I made, I think.
And I can just ask a question about that, Min, because you were saying about the tissue sort of melts, and we could see from previous images with the biscuits, you crush them through the performance, and then there was the other piece where you throw the water into the air. And I wonder if there's something about almost destroying the objects or them taking on another form at the end of the piece. And could you speak to that sort of decision in the work?
Yes. So the biscuit piece is also the usefulness. This biscuit being consumed is being kind of being destroyed is how it is used, right? And then maybe I was kind of a bit depressed at the time. And then, like, also, life is. I still believe it. Yeah, the life is to the way to death, right? Yes, that being destroyed is that kind of the sequence to. Is being alive means that you kind of sequence into that moment of your kind of like living to death. Is it being alive?
Yeah. So another way of putting that life into the objects.
Yes, is to kind of especially biscuit piece was more like I'm almost like fast forwarding the life, right, of the biscuit in through the performance. And then because if you eat it, you don't see it. You may feel it. Maybe you can use the energy or like sugar high or whatever. But if you but you can kind of put it into kind of action. You can kind of show that how that kind of process of being destroyed is. That's what I was thinking. And yes, and then we going into kind of next stage of my life, I guess.
Yeah. So we've spoken before, Min, about the curating work that you've done. So the exhibitions that you've created, and I think we've got an image. So if you could speak to your role as a curator, and how your exhibition work might also deal with issues of the self and identity.
So is it like so my kind of I only kind of looked at my work. I mean, when my PhD was practice-based research, and then the ones I looked at the other artists' work is kind of my work was in the center, and then the work I looked at by other artists in relation to my work. And then I got married, and then I had children, and then one day I saw Forced Entertainment, tabletop Shakespeare, complete work Shakespeare. And then, so that was a kind of a moment I kind of start to do more like work, looking at other people's work, where that kind of moment that my work with Lindy, that was Venus and Adonis, that was a Shakespeare's poem. And then my work, and then Hamlet I did, and then also Forced Entertainment, like a Shakespeare, tabletop Shakespeare. That was very interesting in many ways, because to me, I can read all the puppetry work in the work, but I did interview with the Tim Etchells, but he really didn't know anything about puppetry, the tabletop puppetry, or like the like object theater. He came from completely different direction, and then kind of we meet in that performance. So So I did the research on Shakespeare and puppetry, and then I edited a small kind of magazine volume about Shakespeare and puppetry, and then I moved to US following my husband's career, and then maybe also around his family after we have children. So we kind of decided to move to US. And then I got a job at Ballard, that is a puppet museum. So at that time, what I had was I had to curate an exhibition, but what I have researched was the Shakespeare and puppetry. So this is how I kind of started as a curator. I mean, that exhibition just put together what I already knew and then what I didn't know what was going on in the US together. So you see in the picture, there is a big Ophelia is done by Bread and Puppet. That is, and then the small toy theater you see there is by Grace Small Works. So it was kind of, that's how I began as a researcher, and then in more like, I don't know, how do you call it? More like academic researcher rather than practical. If I can make the distinction. And then in the next slide, so also in the exhibition, I've also had brought that linseed oil and oil bottle and the jar all the way from UK. From that was Macbeth. And somehow, yeah, that happened. And then also Tiny Ninja Theater's Macbeth. That is also same Macbeth and then Lady Macbeth in that picture you see. Yeah. And it's a kind of very, and then I completely turned around and then decided to look at something I really completely against, was the representation. In fact, I've been doing all materiality and then like the materiality in motion and that kind of thing. But actually puppetry is very useful in objectable representation. I mean, if you know what's going on in UK, there are a lot of animals on stage in UK, like, well, from Warhorse to Life of Pi, because now puppetry give you opportunity to all sorts of animals. So that's, I mean, that's also a problem. But if puppetry is an object that lets you play, lets you be somebody who you are not. So it's a lot of those that the performance. So when I started on puppetry's racial reckoning, it wasn't really simply about what people did, puppeteers did, when they want to represent somebody who you are not with the puppets. And then it became, I didn't think that it will be that controversial at all, because when I look at the history going through that, nothing can, almost all the puppets cannot survive in that kind of like, cannot going past that threshold that is not racist. It's if they did, a lot of puppet shows were based in Orient, that is like Sinbad, Aladdin, like they all now considered as Orientalist. Then lots of black puppets represented Black or African Americans were minstrel. I mean, was the whole industry was a minstrel in the 19th century US. So it was, that's what I realized in just working on this exhibition. So yeah, so then representation became really difficult issue and really sensitive issue. And then like when I was working as a solo artist, well, yes, I had the issue with the people just to see me as Asian woman, but it was not like I didn't quite understand what it meant in so many different ways. There are so many different ways to understand it. But as I was working in the exhibition, that I kind of now retrospectively understand the complex of my position as an artist from Asia and all that kind of thing. I think, is it? Yeah, I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting what you're talking about, Min, and also the title of this piece I find really interesting. So Puppetry's Racial Reckoning. So can you speak more to maybe the decision of why it's reckoning here, and what sort of impact maybe you wanted this piece to have on audiences that came to see it?
Well, I wish I had a better. It was I had to, I mean, like there were like I think it went on for 3 months, just couldn't find the right title for the exhibition. I mean, that was my mistake, or maybe it was my ignorance, maybe, that the first exhibition title I proposed was The Other. So the theoretical framework of the exhibition was based on the Stuart Hall's work on representation of minorities and ethnic others in popular culture. That's called the Spectacle of the Other. That's the theoretical framework of that exhibition. So I proposed The Other. And then there was like red flag went on all over the places, from like provost level to like social media to it's an offensive title. So we had to put it down. And then from that time, it went through 3 months to choose a title that feels safe. And then I couldn't use race. No. Fantasy or biases, or nothing. Like there's no word it seems allowed. Then to represent what's the content of the exhibition, that is in many ways about misrepresentation in a way. But what I found was is there a right way to represent? I'm not sure. And then where I found actually Matthew, my husband, kind of found it. So he listened to the radio, and then this NPR, I think it was NPR, National Radio, was running a series called America's Racial Reckoning. So, okay, I picked it up, and then, okay, so NPR is running this series. It must be safe. It's used by NPR, then we can use this. Yes, and then that's how it came. So even, yes, that's how it happened. Yes, it was really tough. It's just so sensitive that we are a very small museum, but it's just three of us had a lot of discussions. Sometimes we fell apart and then got together, and then it was tough. And then, yes, and then, so I don't know what it would be like if I did it in the UK, but it seems here is more, the US is more tense, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know, it might be because it might be tense in the UK now too, because I think like it seems like last 5 years a lot changed.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting in terms of how you were allowed to exhibit the work as well. I've got lots more questions I could ask about this, but I am aware of time.
Yeah.
So this might be a good point then to open this discussion. Maybe some people have got some thoughts about this that we're talking about right now. What I'll do is stop sharing so I can see people more on my screen. So yeah, if we open up this discussion now, then if anyone's got any questions, thoughts or observations for Min, so feel free to put the hand up emoticon or put your actual physical hand up, and we can work our way through questions. So Josiah, I can see you've got a hand up.
Yes, thank you. I wondered, going back to performing with objects, I had, and your presence. One question I had as you were talking is, how are you performing? Like, how are you thinking of or shaping your movement? I know there's been, people have talked about, if you're a puppeteer and you don't want yourself to be noticed, you send your energy into the puppet. If you're an actor and you're using it as a prop, you kind of think about where you're directing your energy and how you stand, how you move to focus